welcome everybody, and welcome to this panel. The title is Taking Talent to the Next Level, Preparing the Workforce for a Sustainable U.S. Future. Sounds easy, not so easy. Uh, I've been in this country for 40 some years, and I can tell you that I never imagined that access to talent would be a challenge. But as a chancellor of a very large scale research university, I can tell you the real challenge right now for everybody is access to talent. So the university, we have difficulty attracting the right level of PhD students. And if we have the difficulty, I guarantee you, national labs have the difficulty, industry has the difficulty because there's not enough PhDs being produced. So in this panel, we have universities being represented, we have national labs, and we even have industry being represented. And Nick thought he was just a token, but I'll come to that in a second. So let me just, as a representative, so on my right here, Dr. Gregory Washington, president of George Mason. Give him a big hand. To his right, Dr. Elizabeth Cantwell, president of Utah State. Dr. Carol Burns, Deputy Director for Research and Chief Research Officer, Berkeley Lab, please. Dr. Stephen Ashby, Director, Pacific Northwest Laboratory. And last but not the least, Nick Pinchuk, President and CEO, Snap-on. It's a company. Okay, so let's see. So we talked about the current context is, so the greatest asset of this country is access to talent, great research universities. I think the weakness that we are facing right now is the same access to talent is being very limited. The American citizen doesn't want to go into a PhD program that easily. So we are seeing a reduction there. I'll talk about it in a second. There's a lot more constraints being put upon public research, public funding for research in terms of classification, security, ITAR. I can just go down the list. So you cannot just be willy-nilly go and find anybody you want as a PhD student. It used to be you would pick the best people, could be from India, China, Africa, Brazil, didn't matter. They came from all over the world. We can't do that anymore that easily. It's still possible, but it's not that easy. You add to the complexity where middle America, or a lot of America, sees higher education in some sense as a waste of time and money. So they wonder why these higher education institutes even exist. And in some sense, it's our fault, because if you look at the public perception out there, we are not without blame. So there's a lot of complex situations, dynamics going on. So I think what we want to do is, let me just start by posing a simple question to all the panelists. You have 2 minutes each, please, no more than 2 minutes, because then we need time for other questions too. So if you look at your current situation, how do you see our ability to access talent at the right level for the next 10 to 15 years? And do you see your organization having a sustainable access to that talent? So let me just start with Greg out here. Can I start with you, sir?
Sure, why not? Well, we're clearly going to have some challenges relative to talent in the foreseeable future. From a demographic perspective, we know that birth rates declined during the Great Recession, and those young people are now becoming college age. We call it the demographic cliff. It is a real concept. It's not something that's coming. It's something that in many parts of the country it's already here. And so clearly, the pipeline of undergraduate students will decrease over the next 5 to 7 years, somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 to 12%. And in some regions of the country, it will increase upwards of 20%. So the proverbial pie is going to get smaller. And so we know that is coming. But I contend to you that even beyond that, there are some real challenges relative to competitiveness from the perspective of the constraints that are placed on us currently. Let me give you an example. I'll just ask the question. who has more constraints to competitiveness right now, the US or China? If you honestly ask that question, you should think about that question from the perspective of real constraints. Our polarization is constrained. Our demographics are constraints. The issues that you gave in public perception are constraints. And there are a host of others. So we got some real challenges there that we're going to have to overcome. And so I said all of that. I am an eternal optimist, and I believe that there are real solutions here. And that's why it's great to have forum like this, so actually we can begin to discuss them.
All right, Stephen Ashby, what about you, sir? Tell me, do you think the universities are fulfilling the promise of delivering the right talent to you when they come to Pacific Northwest?
It's surrounded by university presidents. I better be careful.
I'm alternating.
All right, so let me say I'm not completely yet confident. And nonetheless, I choose to maintain some delusional optimism because I am also unreasonably optimistic at times. And the concern I have with access to talent is I think that we're looking at generating that talent in the same way we have for a very long time, yet things are conspiring to make it more difficult. First, we've heard through some of the discussions earlier today about the explosion in innovation and what we're doing there and that drive to get more talent, to keep that innovation engine going for our country, to be competitive. So that's where we do need the PhDs and others. I'm going to come back later if we have time to talk about the full suite of talent that we need. It's not just PhD talent, but we do need them. And there's that problem with the demand going up. Then we get to the point you made about demographics. I'm at the tail end of the boomer generation, all right, which means actuarially I'm about 75% dead. Younger generation is like, hurry up with the other 25% and make room for us. And so you look at the millennial coming on, and that's the next largest adult population in the workforce, yet they have very different expectations. Right? They want more experience, they want more opportunity earlier than traditionally has been given. So how do we structure jobs to make that possible, to give that sense, to attract these people? What are universities doing to produce people ready for that kind of continual upgrading of their skills? So, do I have the access now? Not completely. One of the reasons I perhaps unreasonably optimistic at PNNL and I think other institutions, what we're doing in the national labs, what we're doing in some of these areas of innovation are so compelling and exciting, it does attract people. But all that does is move a hole somewhere else. And so I think as a society, we need to address these things. And one of the biggest solutions, besides changing the way we produce the talent, is continuing to keep America open to the brightest minds from around the world to come here, contribute where they can, and eventually get citizenship and contribute across the full range from science to energy to national security.
Cool. Elizabeth, do you think you're producing the students that industry and labs need?
I'll just riff off of something that Steve just said. I do think we are fully capable of producing the students, but really clearly, to your point, Steve, we are hearing from our students, and I'm talking about everything from traditional 17 to 18-year-olds to lifelong learners and everything in between, is this cry for what we call experiential learning at the undergraduate level, at the certificate level, not just in the PhD level. And so I actually think of that through the lens of my experience with national labs, who frankly do a better job generally than companies do in the US, that the ecosystem of I need every engineering student, I need every physics student, I need every student in STEM to graduate with a bachelor's degree and an enormous amount of experiential learning. My partnerships have to be across the board. They can't just be with labs where we do send hundreds, not thousands of students every summer. That sort of ecosystem where the summer is the place where you work in different places and learn about them. You get paid to do that, which bespeaks a real shift of some resources, and you have meaningful work while you're doing it. You get trained. I mean, you bring students in the summer and you rad train them, or they are functioning in a laboratory by the end of their first summer. That is also really different for the companies that we work with. So we spend a lot of time working company by company by company on crafting programs that will give our students experiential learning. Everybody wants it, but frankly, our ecosystem isn't actually set up to scale that so that all of our students in the US are doing that. That would be a game changer for us. The other thing that you talked about a little bit, you alluded to bringing international students here because we're the best. I actually am really keenly interested for our students in changing the conversation about getting access to the creation and transition of new ideas. That idea of being innovators is something that everybody should have access to, not just the best and the brightest. And so the platform that we try and create is really about how cool that is, how the ideas are amazing, and that you, no matter what you come to my university as, we will give you those opportunities and we will transition you out into the workforce, having understood what the creation of new ideas is about. And I really would like to have us walk away from the language around the best and the brightest come to us, then the best and the brightest get access to the creation of new ideas, and then the best and the brightest get access to translation of those ideas, because there's a lot of people and students today who do not identify that way when they come into my university. And I want them to come anyway. I want them to feel like I can have access to that translation of ideas piece, the innovation piece, without being the best and the brightest out the gate. I can do that.
So Carol, in your role, and we'll just leave Berkeley out of this, do you think the other universities are training the type of talent that you would love to hire?
So my boss will say now that's one of his top concerns that keeps him awake at night is recruitment and retention of talent. Now, Berkeley's also a little different in that we have many more postdocs that come through our doors than stay at our laboratory. So we are a part of an educational development pipeline in some respects. We're a bit of a gateway STEM employer, right? Get them in, get them interested in sort of mission-oriented work, send them off to other sectors. So we're keenly interested in helping to be part of that ecosystem to develop that talent. There's, I think, challenges in thinking about it as an ecosystem. How do we facilitate the flow of people? How do we make sure that those investments are made in the specialized tools and facilities that are really going to get people hooked on innovation? That's particularly important, and I think we need to double down in making sure that we're seeing appropriations, not just authorization, maybe. But so I think the recognition of what we need to do is there. We haven't put the whole ecosystem together yet.
First of all, I have to say, you're at the beginning of the baby boomer generation and you think there's 75% chance of being dead? I don't like your statistics. 'Cause I'm at the end, you know what I mean? I didn't like that comment. It made me feel bad. Look, well, first of all, I had to say I'm pleased to be here because when you get a summons by the eminent and honorable Deborah Wynne Smith, you are pleased at your good fortune and proud of the privilege, so thank you. Look here, I'm the only person without a PhD. This is some sort of outreach program to put me up here, It's true. I have a completely different view of the world.
You're an inclusive group here.
What?
You're inclusive.
Thank you. Yeah, I can see that. Right, look, I do have a different view. And the view is this. It's important to pay attention to the work of labs and universities and producing engineers and scientists. But I think this conversation is very incomplete. If you go back to when we were actually threatened in the pandemic, in the days of fear when 600 body bags were being used every day in New York, there were many people staying at home, ordering from, delivery food and ordering out of Amazon in fear. But the people of work were still standing firm. That food and those Amazon things were delivered by a truck driver who couldn't work from home. That truck was loaded by a warehouse worker who couldn't work from home. The mechanic who kept that car running couldn't work from home. And the factory worker who produced or processed the food couldn't work from home. 2/3 of America weren't working from home. The people of work stood their post and kept our society from disintegrating while they engaged and defeated the COVID. Who is more essential? who actually is more essential. And we need more of those people. There are 587, I was on Bloomberg this morning, so I'm full of statistics. 587,000 manufacturing jobs are open. So actually, we can hire engineers. We can hire scientists. We can even hire PhDs on occasion. But the thing is, we can't get people to work in the factories because they view it as the consolation prize of our society. And in some ways, conversations like this relegate them to this. And so I would suggest to you that the seminal issue of our time, of course, these things are all important, is actually upskilling the American workforce. Because this is what's kept us ascendant all these years. And we need more of them now. We need to pay more attention.
Yeah, so
I want to jump in on this point.
go for it.
Which one? 75% or?
No. I said actuarially, and I'm sure you'll outlive the actuaries. The point I want to
still
get
didn't
is
like it.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I'll buy you a drink later. But the point I want to jump on is we started this off with a focus on the PhDs, and as I said in remarks, it's not just the PhDs. If you look at the 6,000 people at my laboratory, a minority have a PhD or even an advanced degree. We have the technicians, we have the skilled crafts, people who actually make things. And you're absolutely right, during the pandemic, they were the ones, the essential workers who kept the campus open so that we could do the lab work or the classified work that could not be done at home. And I think when I'm looking at it, I serve on the Washington Roundtable, which is a group of CEOs and execs and a token lab director in Washington State. And our concern is about getting credential attainment up to 70% for our Washingtonians students. Just 70%. When I say credential attainment, I mean from a certificate all the way up to a 4-year or graduate degree. You're absolutely right. We've got to look at that full need of the workforce for across the whole United States, but including in our own lab. So please don't think that all we need, there's room for for everybody. And the biggest part of the population is being left out are those who are traditionally underrepresented. Where are these people in our outreach to bring them into the lab at all levels?
Right, so remember the topic is sustainable future, right? So you need a broad range of capacity. Just make one point and then I'm going to give it to Elizabeth. So only a third of this country has an undergrad degree, which is a statistic lost on most people, right? Because, and this has been that number for the last 50 years. It hasn't changed. Even though we talk about higher education and social mobility, only a third has an undergrad degree. So when people talk about being a first-generation college student, it's not as surprising or shocking, right? We'll come to that in a second. So Elizabeth, I want to hand this over to you. And
So I just want to jump in because I am the president of one of the very few public institutions in the US that has components that go all the way from certificates to AA degrees to sort of these regional corporate company-related bachelor's degrees to R1. So we do it all, and I will repeat the call. All of my students in the certificate programs they will come to our training programs if we bring companies to the table at the same time. May or may not be a internship, but they crave the capacity to understand what that world will be like when they go there. And that's certainly true for the AA degree students and any of the students in the regional capacities where their jobs are going to be right there. They do not know fully if it is for them until they see our regional companies at the table with our faculty. And we work every day to build that, but I will say at every level, we need in my opinion, a different partnership across the labs, universities, and the corporate sector to give every level of learner an understanding that that capacity is available, that those jobs are available, and what that would be like. So instead of going, well, I'm skeptical because I don't know something, I haven't been in that world, or I've spent all my time in the last 4 years doing online education in my bedroom. Giving real experience is critical right now.
okay, let's go to Greg. I think you have something to say about that.
So right now there is a talent challenge, but what's coming is a talent crisis. And like I talk about the demographic cliff earlier, but there's a scaling problem here in that the number of individuals who are coming out of the workforce that those with that 25% left, right? Those individuals who are coming out of the workforce, we're not putting in the workforce enough people to backfill that those individuals that are coming out. We actually have to rethink scaling. We need to start with a Apollo-like internship initiative. Companies should have internships on the order of the hiring that they're going to need over the next 5 years. So if you're going to hire 10,000 people, you know, and you need 10,000 internships. What is this? 200 internships. You're going to hire 1,000 people on the back end. You got 200 internships. Where are they going to come from? They need experiential learning opportunities, right? And we need partnerships with institutions like mine who will actually go into communities and attach and connect to those students who don't necessarily see themselves as the best and brightest. You know, 30% of my graduates are low income, 35% of them are first gen. I got a really high graduation rate. We find these young people. We're a majority minority institution. We're the largest 4-year in Virginia, right? And so we find these folk, we give them an opportunity, and then we look for companies to work with, and we're a net exporter of talent. So what that's telling me, in an area where there are a huge number of companies, we're sending talent out of our state. And the primary reason for that, it starts with internships. It starts with this whole drive for connection. And that comes from building the right kinds of partnerships. And so I would hope that that's the kind of thing we can, when we talk about being competitive, we can actually start to think about. How do we expand opportunity way beyond where we are now so that we can actually have that workforce when that crisis time hits? Because it's coming. It's only going to get worse from here.
So let me take you to the other extreme, right? So clearly, I think we all agree that at the low end, by low end, I mean high school graduation and 2-year degrees, that's what I mean. We need that workforce, and there is really a paucity of that workforce, partly because the society sees even community college as like a losing proposition, and 4-year degree is what everybody wants, even though not everybody's well employed at the end of the 4-year degree, right? So I think that's the point Nick was making. But I want to go to, if you go to the last 50 years in this country, it's been an amazing wealth generating machine. I mean, it's unbelievable how much wealth has been. Even last 20 years, post 2000, how much wealth has been created. I never thought there'd be $1 trillion market cap, and here we are with $3 trillion market cap companies now, a couple of them, right? So, and much of this is created because of US investment in research, in innovation, in entrepreneurship. I can go down the list. We heard all of these things throughout the morning. It's higher education primarily. So my concern, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is if we limit the number of top-notch, the best of the best coming to this country, partly because research funding is so limited or so colored in money that it cannot go to anybody from all countries coming to this country, then how do we think about sustaining, let's take Pacific Northwest, for example. Your cutting-edge research in material science, nuclear science, I can just go down the list. How do you sustain that if there's not enough American PhDs being produced and not enough PhDs being produced, period, including foreign PhDs?
So I'll answer that question. A couple things I want to maybe disagree with your premise. I don't think we should look at low end, high end. I think we should look at a continuum of people we need to bring in at all levels to be successful. So at PNNL and all the labs, I think in all our companies, we need a range of people, as I said. And I think we should also review that innovation is not something that just happens at the PhD level, right? When we're working with our skills craft people, they're keen for what we're doing in clean energy technology development because they see that's a way of upskilling themselves to new skills that will make them more competitive. Now, what we're doing to try to maintain this pipeline, first of all, we have to excite more people. And so one of the things that we do, and I work for a company called Battelle that has the privilege of running the laboratory, we put a lot into STEM education outreach from K through 12. We touched about 38,000 students last year alone. We bring in 1,600 interns from high school to graduate to get familiar with the lab, and then of course we mine that there. And it's a mix. It's not just only US citizens. We have a lot of work that we can do that brings in foreign nationals. So that's why I said I think we have to continue to be welcoming, but I think we have to recognize that some of our staff will come in one capacity, and maybe they'll upskill because of on-the-job training, or they'll go back for other degrees if that's something of interest to them. My biggest concern right now is are we going to maintain the steady investment we need in this country to continue to attract people into these positions? That's one of the concerns I've got. When I've talked to our congressman very early on, I said, I need steady funding as opposed to funding like this, even if that integrates to more money over time. Because our people need to see a commitment to them. That's what I need at the laboratories. And you heard from the previous panel about investment, not just the people, but the infrastructure that attracts people to work on these things, and the people from the skilled craftsperson all the way up to the PhD who's having that idea, and then teaming with those people to make these gadgets.
So I hear what you're saying. Let me pose this question to some of the other panelists. I think it's one thing, everything that you said is correct, but it still doesn't tell me a cutting edge national lab, how does it get access to enough PhDs that are not being produced? I mean, because at the end of the day, fewer Americans are going into higher education for PhD programs. And if we limit the number of foreigners, and especially some of these countries, we are actually putting a limit on ourselves. So Carol, do you want to?
Yeah, I'd
tackle
love
that?
to talk to that one. So I agree that it is a concern of supply, but I think part of it is about the willingness of workers in the future to enter into some of these disciplines. They have to get excited about the fields. They have to get excited about the impact. We have to make them attractive. Part of it is, I think, in some case, how we articulate what the value of an education or an experience is. We talked some about experiential learning, but let's talk about curriculum too.
Mhm.
We have to tell people, yeah, you might learn to solve a partial differential equation, but you're also going to learn how to build a business case. You're going to learn how to adapt across different disciplines. You're going to learn how to sell yourself. You're going to learn how to work with others and how to create a team environment and manage projects. And all of those are skills that can be cultivated. Those are things I think we're going to need. I had the privilege to attend the first ever UC Academic Congress on Graduate Education on a panel on Beyond the Professoriate. And we talked a lot about how when I bring new workers into our laboratory, often those are the skills that we think they need.
Right.
We're developing early career training programs to help them with that. But I also want to say that we need to motivate people more. When I talk to early career researchers, we talked a lot this morning about the desirability of multi-sector experience, but it's not something that's sequential. It's something now that's simultaneous. People want to have multiple careers at the same time. I'm going to have a job, I'm going to start a company on the side, I'm going to work I'm going to get policy experience while I'm working in a technical degree program. We need to accommodate that sort of adaptable learning style. And furthermore, we're talking about it like we're opening the doors and letting people walk in. We have to go out and reach out and cultivate and find that talent and energize them, which means we can leave no talent behind.
Right.
Domestic, foreign, whatever degree program. And we also have to make sure that we are getting people excited about, we're choosing them for their adaptability and their continuous learning capabilities and not just for their accomplishments. So non-traditional learners.
Okay, that's a great comment. So wait,
So if you're worried about PhDs, you got to think about the pipeline.
All the way from the,
If the reality is, if there are fewer undergraduates, there are going to be fewer future PhDs.
right.
And if there are fewer high school graduates, there are going to be fewer undergraduates. And so we got a pipeline challenge. And then you exacerbate that with adding the additional fact that India and China are investing in higher ed and building institutions like crazy to keep their students, right? So even if you make the policies more liberal to allow for more foreign students to come into the country, you have these other countries recognize that there's a talent crisis coming, and they're putting the mechanisms in place to keep their people. We have to change our focus. Our focus really has to be upon how do we provide many more opportunities for people. We need to expand internships dramatically. We need to find people wherever they are. Right now, there are 36 million Americans with some college and no degree. 36 million. And so my philosophy is they can be engaged to get a degree because they can be upskilled, as our gentleman from industry just highlighted. They actually are potential for getting
But the
upskilled.
difference is this. Here's the difference. I'm just a simple tool maker. I don't know that much. But we don't need the the skills of tomorrow. We need the skills of today. You see, the thing is, lots of times, I applaud the idea of the internship and the broad thing at Utah State where you take other people. But in fact, we need 597,000 jobs are available today. They have to have the skills of today. We don't care about the skills of tomorrow. There is in the land some kind of seduction around singularity. The idea we're going to jump ahead. This is liberating. You're going to discover something that's going to make you more competitive in one kind of singularity. Well, I think part of it is because the Wall Street value, this is where the valuation comes from. It's Wall Street. There's a car company on Wall Street that the only way you can justify the valuation is if Americans are going to voluntarily pay 20 to 30 times more for their cars in the future. That's the only way you can justify the valuation. So the thing is, we built that value, but it's not on anything, it's on sand. The idea, if you're a guy like me, you know that you need to think about tomorrow. But the path to tomorrow leads right through today.
Exactly.
There haven't been that many singularities. In fact, almost no singularities in my lifetime. We have become more competitive day by day by day by day. And the future, the idea of hitting the home run can distract you. I think that's one of the things that the science community can think about. The whole community, the whole education community can think about. Because we need today's skills now. We can't worry about, 5 years from now, AI is going to be here. Believe me, AI won't be a singularity.
The AI is not going to fix your toilet.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I was just thinking of that the other day. I have 7 grandchildren in my house now.
Right.
My toilet's gone. Do you think I like my iPhone or indoor plumbing? Which do you think I like?
So I have to tell you a story. I was visiting a high school, and I was talking to this young man, and I said, hey, what are you going to do when you graduate? And amazingly, he said, I want to be an underwater welder. I said, why there? And he explained to me how much more money he would make as compared to even with a master's degree.
A great person.
That's right. If that weren't true,
Right.
if you think about that, just a minute. I don't mean to, universities are our greatest. We have the greatest universities in the world. You can see this. When you go to Japan, they say they have great universities. No, not like ours.
Right.
Here's the thing universities ought to think about. If universities were delivering, we couldn't even contemplate the idea we would have to forgive student loans. What does that say? That says something about the value. When I was just on a factory floor last week, and I met 95 people, and they're talking about going to school, but they're saying, is it worth it? Am I going to get something that's worth something? So I think that does say something for all of higher education. I know the eminent universities
so
here.
I feel the presidents are compelled to defend.
That's okay. I said that for a reason. And oh, by the way, I checked the time, so therefore it's not.
So we have
Drop that bomb right at the end, right?
Before I get
exit stage.
30 seconds to Elizabeth and 30 seconds to
It's
Greg.
important to point out that it is worth it, and all the data shows that the problem is a trust problem, not an effectiveness of the value of education.
Well, I don't think money is a value at all. I don't question the value of education.
Right.
But if you have to forgive student loans, doesn't it say? When I was a kid, I went 5 years, got a master's degree. I would have paid, my first job would have paid for all 5 years tuition twice.
Okay, so we're going to fix the loan situation, but anybody want, so let me tell you.
So let
Can we talk about the trust problem, though? That's
Okay.
really where we're going with.
Right, we have 22 seconds left.
Perfect.
Take it.
So Nick knows how to.
We have You know, we,
I wasn't on Bloomberg for
we
nothing.
don't have a, in my opinion, all of these things are really, really interesting to discuss.
Right.
But the data is irrelevant if we don't have trust in our institutions of higher education. and we
That's
don't.
indeed true. So
That is
And
a
some
problem.
of that, quite honestly, is our fault
exactly.
because we have put too many students in the wrong majors.
Exactly.
That is the
So
reality.
I think we need to.
And we need to and we need to rethink that.
So let me close this by saying the American economy is like a Shakespearean stage. It takes all types. The country doesn't work with just PhDs or just undergrads or just high school grads. We need everybody to be participating, to be taking part in the economy, and social mobility has to exist for everybody. And I think the higher education system in this country, as much as we might malign it, if you go through high school, community college, undergrad colleges, research universities, it's a beautiful continuum. And maybe we need a little bit more focus on professional training of, pardon me? Yeah, how we train, right? But this is a great country with a great future. I think there's a lot of sustainability here, and we just have to have faith. So thank you, everybody. Please give them a big hand. Stop.